Hello, welcome to Image Bearers Create. This is season 2, episode 6. The title for our broadcast today is Advertising Principles Every Entrepreneur Should Use. So our special guest today is Edje Ramey. She is a local entrepreneur. She founded Ramey Marketing LLC, a full-service advertising agency located in Columbus, Ohio. She has collaborated with award-winning talent and has served many small businesses from coast to coast since its founding in 2012. Edje Ramey specializes in working with local outreach initiatives, and she has advised many minority-owned businesses on their marketing strategies. So I think we're in for a treat today. Those of us who have an entrepreneurial mind, which I think is really all of us to a degree, Edje is going to go through and break down some different strategies that I think we can all use to get our ideas going, further perhaps improve our businesses, and see how we can market what we already have to wider audiences. So again, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Good deal. So tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to start Ramey Marketing.
You know, I am a social media strategist by nature. And I started this in 2012. I really kind of got started experimenting with social media, maybe back in 2010. And this was kind of before social media was even a career path that anyone could study. No one anticipated it going where it was going. You know, Facebook launched, I think, my freshman year in college. And so at that time, we were in a recession. There were no jobs. And I was actually a fashion design student who could not find a job, like many college kids were during that time, couldn't find work. And it was just kind of a job that was faith-led and created just for me. Mm-hmm. So I started it then at that time with experimenting with it. I wrote a paper. I went back to graduate school because I couldn't find a job. So I thought that I'd study marketing. And I took this one little class called social media. It was called marketing technology, and social media was a small aspect of it. I wrote a paper about how social media would be the future of business and customer service and sales. And one day I met a customer and talked to them about my paper. We just kind of got trapped. I worked in a cell phone shop. I used to be a saleswoman. And I talked to them about it, and they offered me a job doing their social media marketing for them after I told them about the paper that I was writing, and they let me experiment and play around with their marketing. And at the time, I had been there for about a year, and no one was there to teach me how to be better. So I told them I would leave and try to go work for an advertising agency, and they asked me if I would continue to support them in social media. So I kind of accidentally started a business. I continued to consult. And once I moved to that advertising agency, I was there for like 45 days before they let me go. So I had all these other ideas and things that I wanted to do. And then I had my first client. I thought, hey, I can do this. I'll just go out and get more clients. So I just was able to pioneer in that space, at least in my city. And the rest is history.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And now you have another job that you do too, right? Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I am the Senior Vice President and Chief Digital Strategist at the Saunders PR Group. And there I focus on digital strategy and a lot of our creative and branding and messaging. That's usually the efforts that I lead. And that was a job that I created for myself, actually, kind of rolled into that accidentally.
Welcome to Image Bearers Create.
Image Bearers Create. Sometimes you have to create your job, you know. But that started because over time of me consulting at Ramey Marketing, you have this team that you kind of work and move with. And my partner at the time there, she worked on PR, and I always did social media. And eventually we got more and more clients together. And we had a point in our business where it just made sense for us to merge. So that's what we do in our big contracts. We work together, but we still consult individually in our businesses, which is what I'm doing at Ramey Marketing still now.
Okay, no, that's awesome. I think that leads perfectly into our next question, which is, you know, people have like sometimes an idea, you know, they, you know, hey, I want to sell shirts, or I want to, you know, have a service, whether it's even as something like, you know, lawnmower business or what have you, and they have an idea and they want to then take that thought and create it into a business. And you've already done that twice with your current positions. But I think more specifically for those that are watching, how would you recommend someone go from idea to, either starting a company or having something that can be self-supporting?
Well, I always tell people to do these two things. And if you do these two things, you'll roll right into it. You have to first put it on your schedule and you have to put it on your budget.
Hmm.
Got to start there. If you're not willing to put it on your calendar and if you're not willing to put it in your budget, you're not serious yet.
Time and money.
Time and money, those are big things. So start there. And then write it out. Like really sit down and write a plan, because I think that business plans, even if it's a one page, are very powerful. It goes from being an idea into your head into being this vision now of fruition, a roadmap for how you may get there. You're gonna have to throw the plan away, of course, because it never goes the way you think it's going to go. But at least you've got something, a structure, a framework in front of you. So write that vision out. It's very important, and be prepared. That's another thing. Is I had to let go of saying, I'm a saleswoman. I had to say I am Tia Ramey and I'm a social media strategist every time I introduce myself. And that just created more and more opportunities. So be prepared and have that vision at your lips. It's a numbers game, and as many people as you can introduce yourself to with this new business you're building in your mind, it just pushes you right into it.
That's awesome. Thank you. So I know with your company, Ramey Marketing, you have a number of services for entrepreneurs to help them, strategize, grow their business, and so forth. Can you please share about some of those?
Yeah, so one of the services that are my absolute favorite, is really dear to my heart, is I really was able to build my business through teaching people how to do social media themselves. Eventually, after doing a lot of teaching, they get to a point where they're too busy and they'd rather just hire me to do it. So most of my clients were at one point my students, which was nice. But that's one of the services that I offer. It's just teaching. Sometimes it's one-on-one consulting, or classes, workshops you can take. I've gone from one company to the next. I'm teaching their marketing team or their sales team how to leverage social media. But then there is just me doing the work, and that's social media advertising right now is probably the most popular service that I provide. People are getting hip to really wanting to run those social and digital ads. And I do anything from newsletters, keeping up with your entire web presence, writing your blogs, managing your website, and managing your social networks as well. So we are the custom content company because we create all of your web content.
Okay. Now, digital marketing, for those that may not be aware, how would you define that? And also, what do you do in that space?
Well, that's the part where I love to distinguish the marketing part from the advertising. What makes digital marketing what it is all the opportunities to measure and capture your audience and understand them. Because without those numbers, without ways of understanding what the analytics are showing you, that's really just advertising. Like you can put a picture on a billboard, right? And that's advertising, but you have no idea really how many people saw it, who interacted with it, who was more likely to read that billboard. That's the digital part. We get a chance to review your website traffic. How long did they stay on that website? Which channel did they come through? What are the actions that they took? And that's where you hire a marketer so they can read those analytics and tell the story and start to recraft your message and some of your campaigns, and even draft up your advertising based on what those numbers are showing.
Wow. So I would have to say it's a lot different than someone driving by a billboard, because what data do you have from that necessarily? Right. But with all the digital technology that's out there these days, from Facebook to YouTube analytics to LinkedIn or whatever, you can scrape or pull all that information to better understand all the sources, including obviously websites, blogs, and all these kinds of things. So that's awesome. As far as YouTube, I know you have a channel, and that's one of the things I think is noted on your website. What do you specifically provide in that area?
So my YouTube channel is inspired by my consultations with clients, or sometimes questions that came from students in my classroom. And they could be anywhere from how to start a business to now how do I create marketing that converts, or why aren't people following me? I'm creating constant content, but why don't I have any followers? So I do my best to give free tips and tricks on what you should be doing from start to finish on getting your business started, to understanding even how to communicate with your customers and provide good customer service and retain them. But that's what my YouTube channel is about in a nutshell. We probably are spending a lot more time on communication now than we were on some of the marketing advice, but just advice for entrepreneurs on how to improve that part of their business.
So some of the things I think you mentioned before is you can actually your team can do the editing of videos, the uploading content, all those things are what you guys can assist with as far as a YouTube channel.
Correct. We can manage and help you create your entire digital presence from start to finish. The only thing we can't do is be the talent for you. So you have to be willing to be the talent or have an ambassador somewhere for us to reference. But yes, we will completely manage your content and create it.
That's awesome. So as I was going through your website, just in preparation for today's interview, I came across one of the companies that you work with in, I believe it would be in Columbus, SSK Plastic Surgery. And they had a lot of really great and I think specific things that they shared as far as some of the successes that you were able to help them with as far as their digital presence and advertising and so forth. Can you please share about that opportunity?
Yeah, they were actually one of my first clients when I launched my business back in 2012. And they were new. They were launching a new practice. They're actually in California. So I'm here in Columbus and he was in California. And if you can imagine, it's very hard to launch a plastic surgery business in California and beat out the competition because they're pretty well established. And at the time he wasn't board certified just yet. So we had all these wonderful challenges for how we were trying to get in front of the public, do it at a cost-efficient manner, build a reputation. And so for that company, I helped to write his blogs. At the time, we were managing his social media, managing his Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even LinkedIn, which was very awkward to be a plastic surgeon trying to post before and afters on LinkedIn. So we had to get really creative about how we were going to promote him and establish him in his community. And I saw then what we'd really learned was how social media really works in conjunction with a lot of your other marketing efforts. So there are certain business models where you can't put your full weight on social media, but it can bring you some of the leads. But you've got to have a great sales team that knows how to convert those leads into sales. So we learned then how to set those expectations and what does that look like? What are the boundaries and what can social media do for you? What can it do? But it was a great partnership. And my biggest competition is when someone hires somebody in-house to do their social media for them. So I love getting businesses to that point to where now you can hire your in-house marketing director who can manage these things full time. So he eventually got to that point and we were able to hand it over to his marketing director who could then take it from there. And I always say that that's when I know that my clients are successful.
Yeah, and I'll just read some of the statistics, and I'm sure this was early on, so it's probably a lot higher than it is now. But it says in just a few months, the business went from, it's received 1,000 likes on the Facebook page, 1,300 followers on Twitter, Instagram, over 250 followers, 300 new contacts in LinkedIn, and 30,000 views on Google Plus. Again, this was probably in the early time, and it's probably maybe updated since then. But I think just goes to show, I think for the audience, some of the actionable items that you were able to help obtain, for this client, and they were very, very happy. I think it's Dr. Sean that was there. So.
Yeah, yes. And at the time, Instagram was just like on its cusp. So it was a lot of experimenting, and I always appreciate when my clients let me kind of just give me free reins to play around and figure this thing out, because marketing is a lot of experimentation and measurement and then redrafting the strategy.
Hmm. Yeah, I've watched a few of your videos on YouTube, and I think you said you kind of ported some of them over from Facebook Live, which is your primary, has been your primary mode of communication to some degree. And to me, I think you're a very good communicator. You're very skilled. Would you say that you've always been that way? Is it something that you've learned?
No, I was not always a good communicator. I find that being articulate and being a good communicator are different things. And so I've spent so much time being misunderstood that communication became something that I obsessed over, especially since I was working in communications. And it was a skill that I had to invest in. I will say that that really helped me. Number one, I invested in it because there was a recession and there were no jobs. So I started investing in being a good communicator so that I could get a job, and it worked in maybe a few weeks. Big difference.
How would you differentiate between being articulate and being a good communicator?
I believe in, and my requirement for being a good communicator is being able to inspire change in the people that you speak to. And there are some people who are great with words, but it doesn't mean that their words resonated in a way that inspires someone to be a different person than what they were when they spoke to them. And now that is my requirement or my standard, that I do my best to understand the responsibility of the words that I am using, and to make sure that it changes for the better. And we should always be changing and developing one conversation after the next. There's a principle in the Bible that I hold to my heart of being accountable for every idle word. So I think a good communicator is aware of their words and what it does to the people they're speaking to, and they're strategic about what those words should do when they talk to someone.
So you would say you probably have been always articulate, but you've grown in your ability to be a good communicator, is what you say.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So for those who either wouldn't see themselves as either articulate or a good communicator, what would you recommend?
I would definitely recommend reading more. I think that that is important, that you can really visualize words. And it's more of a challenge now than it's ever been because we have so many videos for people to watch. But really discipline yourself to pick up a book. And just like we did when we were kids, they made you read different books so that way you were seeing different words all the time. It's really great for your brain to continue that practice. So if your struggle is with being articulate, read more, do a little less watching, a little more reading, even if you just turn on the subtitles of a video. If that is one of your favorite things to do, you watch a video like this, turn the subtitles on. So that way you can see those words and visualize them. That does help. And if you are a communicator and you struggle with that, it's good to take the time to understand what it is you want from a conversation. What should the outcome be before you start speaking? So that way you can gain control of the discussion. And you could be a lot more responsive versus being reactive. And that's really what being a good communicator is about, is controlling your reactions and making room for the person you're talking to be themselves as well.
Perfectly said. You just proved your point right there. Speaking of books, I know you wrote earlier this year, I think it was in March or so, you had published, I think it's an ebook called Cancel.
Yes.
Can you please share about, what prompted you to write this book and a little bit about what it is about?
Absolutely. So it's actually on print. It is an audio book as well. It is an ebook. But Canceled is inspired by my career as a crisis communications professional. I found this strange niche for myself working with public officials and people who are running for public office in my time doing social media. For some reason, my friends kept running for office. So naturally, they tagged me in to do their social media. And we found that we have this new cancel culture where it's so easy to say the wrong thing. And then once they got into office, things were a lot more strict and the cultures were different than what it was before. And so I wrote the book for people who want to prevent a crisis communications professional like myself from coming into their life. So that way you can learn how to speak to people and have honest dialogue, safe dialogue, and expand your capacity for that. And because that's hard to do now, we have this word diversity that's expanding. It doesn't mean the same thing that it meant 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And so I wanted people to learn how to expand their capacity to have honest dialogue so that we can communicate better again and prevent crisis in our communications and be a lot more strategic with what we say, because we're being held accountable for it now more than ever. We've never had a running record of our words, especially on social media. We've always had room to grow up or make mistakes and say things. Now everything is recorded. So it's my contribution to a new generation that's coming into the world that isn't really being taught how to communicate or hear effectively.
That's a pretty I guess, I don't know if it was a lightning rod, but a pretty controversial title too, canceled.
Yes.
So I think you mentioned in one of your videos that there are like 7 types of communication. Mm-hmm. Can you share at least some of those?
Yeah, so we say there are seven major languages of communication, and just different places where people are coming from. And I start by telling people that, like, where we are all formulating our words and that place that we're coming from is really based on, where your sense of duty lies as an individual. And we all have 7 different languages that we're speaking, and sometimes we're misunderstanding each other because we don't understand that we all have different ways that we process words. And so, just for example, one of those languages is what I call the family language. So when I'm dealing with a difficult conversation, I'm always looking at family. I'm always seeing myself from those eyes. And sometimes people take that the wrong way, because there's another language that I call the youth language, where people are not aware of themselves as a part of a family. They're only aware of themselves as an individual. So that's where they're coming from when they're speaking. And you'll see this a lot on social media. You pay attention to it. There's another one that I call the fight language. The fight language is those people who their sense of duty comes from justice. We're seeing a lot of that language right now in the media. People who are focused on social justice, people who are focused on standing up for people who are marginalized. That's their language. It's not that people are right or wrong. It's just that this is their language. This is where they come from, because this is where their sense of duty is. There's also the God language. These are people whose greatest sense of duty is to a higher power. It's not necessarily that they're religious people. Sometimes they're very spiritual people. They have a whole other language. If you're not a person who knows how to speak the God language, you're not a spiritual person. You're going to think that the person who speaks the God language is a total weirdo. So those are just a few things, where we all have a deep sense of duty to something, someone, ourselves. There's also what I call the hurt language. These are people whose sense of duty is to their pain. Usually in their language is very oppressed or disappointed. They have a hard time with being hopeful. They tend to be very cynical. So understanding where a person comes from and what language they speak help you to assess what they're saying and not necessarily be offended by it. No more than you'd be offended of someone who speaks a different language. If it was Spanish or French, they just speak a different language than you because they have a different life experience. That's what I explain in the book, is that we're all coming from different places because we have very different life experiences. And you'll never be able to change where someone's sense of duty is, but we can learn to understand each other a little bit better and have a little more patience when we're listening.
Yeah, I think those 3, being articulate, being a good communicator, and being a good listener, mm-hmm. are like old relatives in a small town. I think cool. That you to be successful these days, especially, the internet has made the world a lot smaller as far as our communication.
Yes.
And if we miss any one of those 3, I think we're in for a big trouble. Because we can actually communicate and be articulate in a lot of ways, but if we're not, as you said, listening, then mm-hmm. we're not really hearing where people are coming from, because it is a dialogue, at the same time. So thank you for that. All right. Well, for those that want to find out more about you and Ramey Marketing, I'm sure they can Google it. But is there anything you wanted to share in reference to how people can get a hold of you if they want to either do a phone consultation or again, have an idea and they want to take it from its infancy to actually build it into a business or what have you?
Absolutely. If you just go to my website, rameymarketing.com, or you can follow me on any social network, I'm out there. Just Google search Tia Ramey, and you'll find multiple ways to get in contact. I'm very aware of all of them. But rameymarketing.com is one of the best ways to get in touch with me. And you can also find out my books and different things that I've put out there. Content, everything is right there on my website.
That's awesome. Well, I definitely thank you for coming on. We do have a getting to know you section, which is just to have some fun as we wrap up this episode. So 12 questions. First one is, what's your favorite cuisine?
Indian.
Okay. Masala, puri, naan.
Curry. I love lamb
Okay.
curry. It's my favorite dish.
That's awesome. Yeah, I grew up in Malawi in Africa, and my mom would make Indian food because everyone in that community we lived in were from different parts of the world, and my mom was just a very adventurous cook, really a chef in a lot of ways, and
Nice.
he made some Burmese chicken and all kinds of, so yeah, that's awesome. So what's your favorite film or series?
My favorite film, my favorite series is Rocky. Definitely. I love rooting for the underdog, and for me, that's like one of the ultimate underdog stories. I just love it. Still
That's
do.
awesome. Yeah, that's a lot of times that's a lot of the guys would reference that one, but I can definitely see the inspirational underdog from some of the things that I know about you. So that's awesome. What's your morning routine? You seem like a very organized person. I don't know if you're a morning or a night person.
I am a morning person. I am 4 a.m. First thing, pray, meditate, work out, read, and then create. Usually, that's my routine. I have a full day. I'm kind of done by 10 a.m. I've had 2 breakfasts. I've done a lot more probably by 9 a.m. than most people get done all day.
So do you kind of split your day up into what they call like the what is it? Create, like a creating time. I forget the exact wording, but like where you're like progressing in your objectives, and another part of the day where you're just managing. So I think it's like making progress and then managing, like your bills and your other stuff, which you manage later on.
That's exactly it. I'm up. I do all of my creating. Even my best work is done by 10. So usually the only thing I'm doing between 10 and 2 are all my meetings, because no one wants to talk at 4 a.m. Thank God. So it's my quiet time. But between 10 and 2, that's usually where I have to socialize and talk to people. I'm an introvert with an extroverted career. So those are my blocks.
Yeah, same with me. I'm about the same. All right. What do you prefer, paper Bible or digital Bible?
Paper. I need to have it in my hand.
Okay. All right. I hear you. Favorite book of the Bible right now?
Right now it's Revelation.
Okay.
It took me forever to get to read that book and understand it, and now I'm enjoying it. Now, like, you get to read it with, and you see the technology and influences and sort of some of the parallels. It's like, oh, it makes sense now with AI and all these things are happening. So right now it's Revelation.
Do you have like a commentary that you read that helped you to understand it, or?
No. I think that one day I prayed, and I just, I never understood it. I've always stayed away from it. And then one day I think I read chapter 12, and it just made sense one day. So I
Okay.
enjoyed that.
That's awesome. Favorite Bible character?
David. I love David. He's my favorite. I think that because we got to see more complexity from his relationship with God than anyone, all the way down to his letters and sort of his diary and psalm of everything he was going through. And he's been through so much. So David is one of my favorite because I think he's the most transparent.
Yes, I was just going to say that. Yes, I would definitely agree. Outside of the Bible, what's your favorite book or author?
My favorite book is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's probably one of the best books that I have read. And then there's another one by Danny Johnson called First Steps to Success, which totally changed my life. It was a fantastic book about a woman who kind of was homeless and had lost everything and really had like six months to pull together 6 figures, and turn her own life around. So I love stories like that where you get to hear about people's obstacles and exactly what they did to change. And so that was a great book for me. I still refer to it.
That sounds very interesting.
Mhm.
What would you recommend if someone wanted to read a book in the next 12 months? What book would you recommend they read? What's the one book?
One book that I would recommend that they read. Let's see, I've got so many on my shelf here. I think my favorite that I think everyone should read are the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Okay.
But I'm a self-help book person. That's me. I'm more likely to read those than anything. And if I were going to read like a fictional book, my favorite fictional book is The Shack. I love that book.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a very big one a number of years ago. I think it still continues to this day to some degree.
Yeah, I read it before the movie came out. The book was way better, but I loved it years ago. My mother turned me on to it, and I thought it was just a really creative book.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. Favorite place to live?
My favorite, I love Ohio. I really do because I love our seasons. I would probably just escape in the wintertime. If anyone has ever been through an Ohio winter, it's very moody. But I do love living here. I love our seasons, and football season is my favorite. It's nice to be a Buckeye in Columbus, Ohio during football season.
That's awesome. You're a LeBron fan too, or no?
I am a LeBron fan. I'm a big fan of his. He's one of my favorite underdogs. Still love those stories.
And he fights for the underdog too.
Yes, he does. And I appreciate that.
Where would you most like to visit?
I love visiting Washington, D.C. because I love museums from history and art. I still haven't seen everything I want to see there. And my favorite place in the world is the Library of Congress. So that's,
Really?
I could spend days there, and I still haven't seen the whole thing yet. And just sitting in
So
there.
you haven't been there, but you would like to visit the Library of Congress.
Oh no, I've been there a few times. I just
Okay.
haven't seen as much of it as I'd like to see because you can't check any books out. You just kind of have to go into the reading room and sit down with the books. So there's so many more that I want access to. But that's my favorite place in the world to be is the Library of Congress. I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have not been there.
It's incredible.
All right. Yeah. Team Apple or Team Android?
Apple, the resale value is awesome. Every time I want a new phone, I can sell my iPhone within like 24 hours and get more out of it than I could Android. And I worked in wireless for like 7 years. So
That's
nothing
true.
sells faster than the iPhone. I always sell my iPhone and then upgrade to a new one.
Okay. That's awesome. What are some of your favorite apps?
My favorite app, I think right now is QuickBooks. I love how easy they make it where I can track my mileage and my taxes are just done. That is just amazing.
That's awesome.
That's one of my favorites. And I do love being able to access Google Drive. I think that's a really cool app. When I get ideas for my books and things, I can just go right into a document and type it out no matter where I am. I'm an incessant journaler. I keep a journal with me all the time. So I love things, and even Evernote. I love that too because I have to take notes. I'm a freak about it. I've got a whole bookshelf full of just notes and journals.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If you could have one billboard placed in Columbus, Ohio, in a prominent place, what would be on the billboard?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would if if I had a billboard, I would probably put it right right downtown. I don't know if you ever watched in the 90s, it's Fraser Crane. He's like, I'm Dr. Fraser Crane. I'm listening.
Yeah.
That was his saying. And I would tell people to listen. That's what I would tell people to do. Listen. I'll teach you how.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for everything you do. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day today to join Image Bearers Create. And hopefully you'll be able to connect with some individuals who want to take their game to a higher level. As I know you have the eye of the tiger spirit in you that wants to help people win that next round, so to speak. So again, thank you so much for your time. And for those of you who enjoy this episode, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell.
Thank you.